Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some fascinating stuff today, really getting into the weeds with Michel Foucault.
Yeah.
You know, that whole power and knowledge thing. Yeah, we're going to unpack that. Specifically, his interview, Truth and Power. So get ready. It's about to get deep.
Oh, it definitely gets deep. You know, using an interview like this is perfect because we can really see how those ideas play out. And don't let anyone tell you Foucault was some ivory tower philosopher. Oh, no. His work was always about the real world, like how politics and knowledge get all tangled up.
Right. Like he's not just theorizing about power in some abstract way.
Yeah.
He's out here looking for clues, like a detective almost.
Yeah.
And one of the places he found those clues was in, get this, psychiatry.
Yeah, in the 1950s, that whole what is science question was a big deal, especially with that Lysenko mess over in the Soviet Union.
Okay, for those of us who weren't around then or, majored in Soviet biology scandals, what happened?
So picture this, you've got this biologist, Lysenko, and he's like, I've got a new theory of genetics.
Huh.
Problem is, it kind of goes against, all the accepted science.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Ez's right, because his theories just happen to line up perfectly with what Stalin wanted to hear.
So science as a political puppet.
Bingo. Didn't matter if the science was shaky, Lysenko was the guy, and anyone who disagreed. Let's just say they didn't have a good time.
Wow. So Foucault's seeing this and thinking what?
He's realizing that truth, even scientific truth, can be pretty easily manipulated, especially when power gets involved.
And that totally connects to why he found psychiatry so interesting, right? Because in the interview, he even says he was surprised by how deeply power structures were embedded in psychiatry, even more so than what he called hard sciences.
He thought he'd find power dynamics in physics or chemistry, where the knowledge seemed, I don't know, more solid maybe, but it was in the study of the mind, the human, where he started to see just how sneaky and powerful those forces could be.
It's like he's saying, hey, even the way we define what's normal, what's sane, what's acceptable, that's not just about science. That's about power.
Exactly. And that's where his whole idea of regimes of truth comes in. It's not enough to ask what's true. We got to ask who decides what's true and who benefits from that truth being accepted.
It's like, think about the news, social media, all the information overload. Who decides what we see? Are those neutral choices? Or are there agendas, algorithms, even our own biases shaping everything? It's kind of freaky when you really think about it.
No kidding. And Foucault's point is these regimes, these systems of truth, they're not set in stone. They shift, they change, sometimes in pretty dramatic ways. He called those shifts discontinuities.
Okay, so it's not just a gradual evolution of knowledge. It's more like, what, earthquakes, shaking things up? What could cause something like that?
Hold that thought. We'll get there, I promise. But first, let's stick with these regimes of truth for a second and look at an example from Foucault's own backyard. He noticed that in post-Stalinist France, certain topics, especially anything about power dynamics within psychiatry, well, you just didn't talk about those things.
It's like power dressed up as common sense. We all agree not to talk about certain things, even if those conversations need to happen. Makes you wonder what uncomfortable truths we're avoiding in our own time.
And that, my friend, is why Foucault is still so relevant today. He forces us to look in the mirror, to question everything we thought we knew about knowledge and power.
Yeah, it's like we create this sense of stability, like this is just how the world works, and then bam, something comes along and shakes it all up. Which brings us back to that idea you mentioned, the event, right? Foucault makes it sound almost apocalyptic, like something huge and disruptive.
It's not just, spilling your coffee in the morning. It's about those moments that really throw a wrench in the system, those things that make us rethink everything we thought we knew.
So give me an example. What kind of thing are we talking about here?
Think about the printing press, right? Completely changed how information spread, challenged the authority of the church. Or how about the discovery of penicillin? Revolutionized medicine. Heck, even the internet, that's a big one, right? It's not just a new technology, it's a whole new way of life, a whole new way of thinking.
Okay, I'm getting it. These huge shifts, these paradigm breakers. But going back to Foucault's interest in psychiatry, was there like an event that really shook things up in that field?
Oh, absolutely. He points to the 18th century. Back then, madness, mental illness, it wasn't really seen as a medical thing or like, I don't know, a spiritual crisis, something outside the realm of reason, But then things start to change. People start trying to classify mental illness, categorize it. You start seeing asylums pop up, the whole medicalization of madness.
So we go from like exorcisms to diagnoses, from judging people's souls to trying to fix their brains.
Right. And this is where Foucault's view of power gets really interesting because it's not just about repression, about saying no. It's also about shaping, controlling, creating.
You know, it's kind of like marketing when you think about it. Brands today, they don't just tell you what to buy. They try to tell you who you are, who you should be.
That's a great point. Foucault was fascinated by that, how power works best when you don't even realize it's there, when it shapes your desires, your beliefs, without you even knowing it.
It's kind of creepy when you put it like that.
Oh, it can be, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's also a call to awareness, right? Like once you see those power dynamics at play, you can start to question them.
Okay, so we're seeing how power influences what we consider truth. But what about the people who produce that knowledge, the experts? We talked a little bit about that earlier, this idea of the universal intellectual versus the specific intellectual.
Right, and for Foucault, that shift was happening alongside this rise of what he called the technico-scientific society. As knowledge becomes more and more specialized, the role of the intellectual changes too.
So instead of having these big picture thinkers, we've got all these specialists, each with their own little piece of the puzzle.
And the question becomes, what happens when those pieces don't quite fit together? Or what happens when those experts start serving different agendas?
It's almost like we're trading one form of authority for another, right? Instead of the church or the king, now it's the scientists, the experts.
And Foucault was very aware of that danger, that those experts, those with the specialized knowledge, could become disconnected from the bigger picture, the ethical questions, the impact on everyday people.
So where does that leave us? Like, how are we supposed to navigate this world where knowledge is so specialized, so fragmented? How do we even know what to believe anymore?
Well, Foucault would probably say that's the wrong question. It's not about finding the right answers. It's about understanding how those answers get produced, who's doing the producing, and what agendas might be at play.
So it's more about being critical thinkers, by asking questions, not just accepting things at face value.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that knowledge isn't this neutral thing. It's always embedded in power, in history, in different perspectives.
Which sounds kind of daunting, honestly. Like, how do we even begin to do that in our everyday lives?
Well, think about how you consume information, right? The news you read, the social media you scroll through, even the conversations you have with friends and family. Foucault would say, pay attention to the power dynamics, to the unspoken assumptions, to the ways that language is being used to shape your understanding of the world.
So it's like being a detective, but instead of looking for clues at a crime scene, we're looking for clues in the information we encounter every day.
I like that. Because it's not about becoming cynical or distrusting everything. It's about becoming more aware, more critical, more conscious of how knowledge is produced and how it's used.
And ultimately, that makes us more informed, more empowered citizens, right?
Absolutely. Because when we understand how power and knowledge work together, we can start to challenge those systems, to create new narratives, to imagine different possibilities.
Wow, okay, that's a powerful thought to end on. To everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into Foucault has given you some new tools, some new perspectives to think about. Remember, knowledge is power, but understanding how that power operates, that's true empowerment. Thanks for joining us.